Hello, good day. Welcome everybody to the show, and today we're going to be looking at some features that people are postulating may be the remains of giant trees. We'll get to the bottom of that, maybe. It was something that really sparked my interest, either way. And it seems nowadays there's a ton of things that just want to take your time and attention. This seems when you start to wake up and realize that we are living in a system that is in every aspect of our lives, whether you're just trying to escape and play video games, or you want to go out and integrate and insert yourself into the world. It seems the system is always trying to drain you of every asset you have before it discards you, unless you're able to generate perpetuation of the generations that lead into this. And it seems time is becoming a real rare economy these days. And it seemed even when I worked full-time, I never really had the time to go out and explore all the things I really wanted to. I always thought I'd make enough money to do it later. And now that I have lost my mode of transportation, and I can't really easily get the 20 miles or 15 miles from my place to the next town to easily get to a job. So with the time I've had and the branching alternative researches I've done, I now realize that I never would have been able to see what I see now at those places had I gone, if I would have just kept busy and never found myself upon these thoughts. Anyways, on an upbeat, alternative research always makes me feel like I'm discovering ancient elephant paths. And so now we're pondering whether these are ancient petrified giant tree stumps. And to be honest, I resisted the idea at first. So I really had to lay it out here, what I felt about it. And my conclusion is still a little unsettled, but it's a doozy of a ride. So let's just look at the examples that best fit what some people would say is the remains of some giant petrified trees. Now this is a really good example, the one that I felt like hit their point the most on this whole ancient petrified tree stump thing. I'd really like to get a closer look at this one in particular, but this is just the angle I wanted to approach it at. This is going to be a basalt column pillar special. So I have created some comparative collages for you all, so like, subscribe, and pause if you need to. Alrighty, comparison, let's go. So for the amount of time that I decided to dedicate and the effort to put in and the extent of the search engine, the best I could find was the 3 examples of the basalt columns looking like trees. And of course, there's 2 that's more convincing than the other, but we're going to do side-by-side comparisons. I found a bunch of huge petrified trees, but they weren't really as big as the pictures of old redwoods that I found, so let's put those up for a scaling and picture comparison. And I think the first one's a really good one. It really makes this tree stump look like it's fractured into a bunch of columns, and you see people on top, and a whole new tree coming out. Wowee. And then we have this pretty awesome wooden wagon from the 1920s Dodge chassis. Man, it would be gold to find one of these in mint condition nowadays. Just nothing like them old redwoods. And now also I can't mention the giant petrified tree stump theory without mentioning that some people propose that also some mesas, perhaps some mesas, are also petrified remains of giant trees, though I'm a little more skeptical about that one. But just for a good show, let's look at some examples that might toe the line. And here's one that, as you'll note, somebody is saying it looks like a giant tree stump. Now, I'm not trying to offend anyone, but please take it as you will. We're trying to do critical branching alternative theories on this topic. So let's continue in good faith with some comparisons to actual remains of petrified trees. A lot of people ask me, what are rocks made out of? It's quartz, silica, and trace minerals. How are rocks and fossils made? Well, the electric universe theory has opened me up to transmutation and flash fossilization, or flash petrification, which really lends more credit to these giant tree stumps. But I can get carried away with all these topics, and I want to stay on hand with the fossils. Petrified wood is no uncommon sight all along the Rockies southwest. I feel like there's a lot of fossils everywhere we go. A lot of petrified wood mixed in with sea fossils, but right now we're looking at the wood. I find all this stuff all around my property almost like it has just been shattered and scattered all across the land. There are many other places you can find fossils. Many may not know that it is well documented that they found them in coal streams, tree stumps. Not huge ones, well, bigger than these guys. There's also an opal mine in the southwest where you can find opalized petrified wood. And also I've discovered all kinds of different fossils looking online. There's also opalized pine cones. Now just imagine different pine cone fossils are just finding a huge giant one from one of these giant redwoods. Do redwoods make pine cones? But anyways, enough with that. I'm bored with trees for now. This is a basalt column rock video, so don't get too attached to these rocks or trees or whatever. I don't know. At least that's what I thought this was gonna be. Like, the whole reason why I decided to do this and tie it back to the tree stumps was because this crazy picture I found, and I'll show you it later. But right now I'm gonna show you a bunch of basalt columns that don't look like trees, a bunch of mesas that don't look like trees, and a bunch of fossils that don't look like trees. I'm still on the fence about the tree thing, so please don't get too offended and stick around to the end. Let's look at some basalt columns. Now I can see the edge of a tree shelf, maybe trees. There's some wavies in the bottom ones on the right, but you know, I've seen fossils do that. I've seen tree roots do that. Yeah, I've seen them do this too. Why not? See, they do that quite commonly. Wow, this one looks cool. I mean, yeah, there's a tree down there, and then something broke it, and it might be a little bit more up there. I don't know. This is totally giant tree-looking thing. Hey, and here's one, the shelf with the falls. It's the edge of a tree. I'm sorry, I should probably stop it with the tree stuff. I mean, hey, this could be a tree. Rounded tree from the center, like tree rings, right? See, this one's doing that swirly thing up there, right? I mean, this is my literal observations. I am astounded at how I could probably perceive this. Here's a cave. There's a cave in a tree. No. Here's trees by the beach. Anyway, so you can see the depth of the detail of the research I'm trying to do. But genuinely, I find myself falling into trying to see this perspective from the trees. And of course, if there was a wood wagon in the hood, I would definitely be on it. I just love fossils, petrified wood. So, I mean, this one looks like an island of basalt columns. And it begs the question in my mind, what are basalt columns really? What are they? And what are all the instances I can find? This reminds me also of these. Just threw this in here. I said it wasn't going to be trees. These aren't basalt columns, but they remind me of interference waves, which brings me back to electrical vibrational geology. But wait, again, I'm getting ahead of myself. I gotta show you mesas that aren't mesas. Or trees. And then I'm gonna show you ruins that aren't trees but are mounds, but aren't trees per. I'm kind of getting real confused here. I'm just gonna show you a slideshow of ruins and fossils, trees and stuff. I'm gonna show you ruins, and then I'm gonna show you out-of-place artifact fossils. And now I just want to throw some out-of-place artifacts in here, since we're talking about things that might be wonky and petrified or not. Alrighty, take a moment and pause if you need to before we put on our electric specs and take a little dip into the electric view to find an alternative electric theory geologist. Let's see if there's any alternative branching theories on how basalt columns are made. This is going to be a long video. I wasn't sure how much to clip sample here and have you guys listen to, but there's going to be a lot more after this, so hang on tight and trust me if you want to know, or if you're curious about these giant tree stumps, stick with me till the end. We'll find some conclusive ground to meet on. And by the way, here is that crazy off the wall picture that pulled me into this research and to see this video through to some kind of completion.
This is where you start getting into these weird melted terrains, very torturous, etching and deposition right beside itself. It's almost like it turns into a torrent. Obviously this has to do with the magnetic fields. You can see the rippling, these columns. Here's a perfect example of rippling as it goes up them. Now, this could only happen if these were being built rapidly. You could see the harmonics, or the whatever it was resonating to, the vibrations of the earth, perhaps, that these things were being built up under. You could see that they were being pulled to one side. You can't pull these to one side if they were being built up geologically over millions of years or something. This is a instant or fairly instant process. You can see where they stop and start again. So here's random deposition, or actually this is probably the landscape as it was right here, and then this was being built on top of it. You can see where the heat has cooked it, and it's being built up in a very orderly fashion with these multiple hexagonal shapes. Think of those beards that we were referring to before, but in positive form. And then the order breaks down into chaos and begins building up. Now, of course, it can build up and over because it has a high metallic content, so it sticks to it even to the side. It doesn't require gravity to hold it there like it does if it's more silicate-based rock. This was the landscape before, right along this edge. So this is being ripped up here and deposited here. This basically would be the boundary layer. We see the same thing here. This is the, if I'm not mistaken, that's the Castle of Edinburgh. And you can see that this landscape is the exact same thing as described there. It is a landscape, then these hexagons are building up, and then it goes back to chaos. And then a castle, apparently. Perhaps maybe it was built there for a reason. Perhaps it was holy. But let's move on. Tops will often have a melted terrain. Here is an example. Iron-bearing rock, basalt, highly conductive. So now you have an area which is going to be wanting to come right out of here. It won't pull out of here anymore. It will go to these high points. And this stuff protects rocks underneath. Not without getting damaged, of course. These are basically anodes that are getting worn down by constant electrical discharge. Here's a perfect example of it on top of a tuapi, I guess what they're called, in Venezuela. They are just tortured, melted terrain, etching down, reaching in, going, I can't get through this stuff. This stuff is protecting this rock, because this rock is really tasty. And see how I can get at it because it has high silica content or high calcium content. It will break off easily and I can get at it. So it has to go in and then go under to get at that, because this rock is more conductive and it's protecting it from being etched away. And you'll see that with tent rocks and other places as well. And as such, the material that dropped down was dropping down because underneath it was being etched away, and the mass of the rock was breaking off and falling down, or perhaps maybe it was being broken off and falling down. But either way, it was not getting lifted into the sky nearly as easily as the rock beneath it. Towers are where we get into the both category as well. This is Devil's Tower in Wyoming, obviously, and this is Monument Valley. They are both towers, and both are exact opposites with regards to what happened to them. This was a blob that got dropped and then built up from there. This used to be the landscape up here, and all of that was etched away, and this V shape was a perfect example of why that's occurring. You see this exact same thing on Mars. The reason I put them in the both category is because it's important to note that they can both create this effect, etching and deposition. Let's go look at a little bit more at Devil's Tower. There's a very large conglomerate base to it. A large blob of basalt landed on the ground. It had a different potential than the rest of the Earth, and as such, a lot of electrons were rushed to it. A lot of electrons could flow through it, and a lot of electrons did flow through it. The sky was looking for a place to land, so to speak. It found a place. This blob was super hot, very attractive, was not easily being removed from the land or anything like that. Material is being pulled in and deposited on it. You can see here, this isn't at the tower itself, but I wanted to use it as an example of what I mean by this forming all at once. These were semi-stable pieces of material that were standing, and they were standing while liquid hot, at least, or semi-liquid. Take a look here. These are bent over but not broken. They are made of basalt. They are hexagon in form. They're leaning over, not following the regular pattern. They probably got hit with a shock wave or something. Some of them seem to be fractured here. But this is clearly, this was a force pulling on this whole area up and out, and this was taken with it. And these were all in a state of utility, at least, not unlike solder or lava or something. But they had to be semi-stable and independent forms themselves to do this. I hope that is self-evident just by looking at this picture, understanding what I'm talking about. Hopefully this will become even clearer when I go into further. Note, by the way, the top of Devil's Tower is burnt. It should be. The heat of being so close to the ionosphere, it was probably sticking right into it. The ionosphere dipping down so far that it's touching the top of the Devil's Tower. Here's a perfect example of it, the blob I was referring to from the side. And you can see it's pulled up, and it's so doing broken several times, probably from supersonic shockwaves. Andy would probably give you a better example of that, but let me show you what I mean. Note, by the way, that these don't always happen. They still follow the same rules as before, so this whole area is building up. It no longer has enough current to do the whole area, so it starts doing a smaller area. And that's what we're seeing here, just what we saw before with other mazes. Except obviously these are hexagons. So how does that work? Well, you're going to have a lot of pillars of fire, each one of them little beards twisting, coming from the ionosphere, which is reaching down from up in the sky. These pillars are building up and building up and building up. As they hit a certain point, the ionosphere cannot let them go any higher. Anything above that certain point is lifted and is removed. However, this juncture, right up here at the top of this thing, must be loosely referred to as, because on the outside, as you can see just by looking at it, even the inside is a bunch of little pillars. The outside is a giant pillar, because you have the same effect. Here it comes from the side, and it's going to be spinning around this thing. And this is what's happening here. It was probably blowing things off, things would go flying and so forth. But, be all end all, this would be giving off so much heat, it would be cooking the top of this thing, which is exactly what we see. To finish up, metamorphosis, sorting, geodes, concretions. I think now that you can begin to see how concretions and geodes, especially if we understand concretions as Z pinches that are rounded off pieces of material that fall back to Earth, not unlike planets. Geodes seem to be held within the Earth, not fallen back down, but held there. That's why they have a polarity to them. That is why they have a equatorial bulge, and that is why they have sorting electrically. They are basically Z pinches inside underground lightning bolts, if that makes sense. So we can see this cellular effect with those types of things. We can also.
So if you're still awake and you're still with me, consider subscribing. If you can't see what I'm barking at, then it's that I'm far from done. None of that explained this picture, and none of that will help me conclude whether or not all of these are petrified trees or not. Because you see, within this picture, at first it looks like the pyramids, the foundation of some great temple, but there are these very almost hexagonal, Professor Hexamagonical here, holding up the entire freaking Pyramid of Giza, or whatever temple this is. Of course, we do know that pictures of pictures are just pictures of pictures of pictures, and they could be faked now, then, or anytime. So why up here in the corner do they have a comparison to Venice and this theater? Is this our clue? Let's go to Venice. Alrighty, and I have my passport, but I lack the funds, so let's pretend that we're having a little excursion here. This is not a hermit exploration. This isn't a vacation either, but it would be nice. But we're here to look at the columns, the foundation columns. It seems you see some approaching Venice. They're almost like sentinels out there. And since it's daytime, I think we'll go look around. And what do you know, here in this square, what looks like chaos to us is apparently normal. This street, or this part of Venice, it's on water, it has tides, and this whole area looks like it gets completely submerged. And to them it looks like it's quite commonplace. And it's an interesting thing to note that the tides do this, at least at this part. And everybody is just used to it. They all have galoshes, these rubber boots. And today there's a bunch of people about. In this square at the end, there's this beautiful old world palace. I want to imagine what kind of foundations there are. Maybe some indoor pools, but I came to ask about columns, so I'm gonna pretend I'm asking these people to get a baseline what the mainstream knowledge would be. Hello there, good day. I wanted to ask you guys if you know anything about all of the wooden pillar columns that Venice is built off of. I mean, have you seen this picture? There's Venice on here, so I want to know what kind of columns we have to find. You see it's saying Giza and this other theater, and I know this theater isn't in Venice, and I was able to find a couple of pictures on it, but yeah, anyways, it looked like they had some composite architecture pillars there, but anyways, they'd probably say that if you'd go to a museum, they would tell us the history, and that this whole land was built up on columns, pillars of wood that over time petrified and crystallized into the structure that the whole city is now built on. Long his story short. If you want to know more, you go to the museum, right? Okay, well, I really want to get a good look at these pieces of petrified wood under a microscope. Do you know where I can find any canals or somewhere? Do you think the museum has any pieces I can look at under my microscope? No, I'm talking to myself. I'm not going to get any answers here. Well, let's pretend to take a stroll around and be a good little boy and look at all the pictures I found on the internet. So it appears that if you look around in the canals nowadays, you can see a lot of work going on, a lot of different layering, a lot of old world architecture. Interesting things going on in each picture, 1,000 points of detail. And you can see with this metal corrugation along the walls of the canal, it can be kind of confusing what's the trees or not, again. Very interesting. I love the beauty of the water. I'm taken back to playing Tomb Raider. But as you can see, they are trying to use the most advanced techniques in maintaining and repairing this city, the canals. And I'm still having a little bit of trouble finding the wood on the inner city, so I'm just gonna have to boat around a little bit, searching for this. So let's remember that the wood has to be completely deprived of oxygen for it to fossilize and stay stable. And if the water level is changing so much, it would expose it to a lot of oxygen, so I doubt the newer stuff would be able to hold long enough to petrify, crystallize. I live near the petrified forest, so spotting petrified wood is kind of my thing. Now, in this one, you get a real close-up look at the foundation over these old log-looking things, but these bricks could be old bricks that are repurposed. We have no idea. These are pictures of pictures. But indeed, it was this picture that really, really sold it on me on this fine line between the basalt columns and these trees, and they said that they used rocks in this, and of course there's a brick and some other bricks on the side of here. So who can tell what's rocks, what's old trees that are petrified, and what? We really need a microscope to get in there. And it looked like there was more underneath, but in this one too we see part of an example of some logs, but those look like some tiny logs, and there's a whole bunch going on with that architecture and layering there. It would take a moment to pause and I'd inspect that detail. Now I decided to pretend to visit a museum and go look at some old photos for you guys, but on my way there I boated. I swam across something that gave me a reason to pause. What the heck is this, and why does it look so uncanny? I mean, this is pretty weird. As long as we don't see any other one of these uncanny things, I think we'll be okay. Oh, wait, and there's more. I mean, it looks pretty new. These look like castings. You can see some of the cracking in the bottom, but what do these really remind you of? Take a second to pause and ponder what all is going on here. Where are we? Now with the magic of some old photos, we arrive into the old world. On what looks to be the outskirts of Venice, looking very clean. Very dreamy. And some of these old black and white photos tell us that there is some work and settling to be done. This one, the inner canals of Venice, looking like there indeed is a lot of old weathering and a lot of work to be done. And it must be a really nice day to just be outside like this. And here, of course, we see the work that must be done. This canal looking like it was just cleaned or scraped out, and looks like a building there was destroyed either to make way for the canal or previously, who knows? A bunch of weathering in these old buildings. What you're looking at is a picture of a picture. We could tell you these are post-construction photos, so we could tell you this is after they've cleaned it up. Maybe there is a whole bunch of mud flooding here, and that's why there's a house built here, and they had to move it to clean out the canal that was there before the house, or maybe the house was there and they decided there needed to be a canal there. Who knows? The order I put these pictures in can tell a story, but it depends on what your key thinking is, because if I mixed them up and told you a different story, you're still going to believe what you're inclined to believe. Water follows the path of least resistance. And I can tell you next, this is how they dug out the canals. Before that picture that I showed you, notice a lot of the walls and infrastructure looking old, withered, and built. Looks like they're using a little trolley system to haul the dirt out of here to God knows where. And imagine digging all of this out to let water back into the city. It looks like it was definitely flooded for a good while until there was enough manpower to be put into the canals. Now, this must be hard, intensive labor, needing a lot of people and a lot of time before advanced construction machinery. And if this was a picture post-war, they would probably say that this was just cheaper. And yet, I haven't seen any foundation columns so far. It looks like they're just digging them out. Maybe they're deeper. And indeed, this picture looks a whole lot deeper. But you can definitely tell that they're logs. Good sized ones, and you got your men in suits just hanging around. I can't see any foundations being put over it. I can see some blocks, but it's kind of hard to tell. Again, this is a picture of a picture. We know nothing. And here, now we see the rocks and all the log columns. Foundation looking like it's already there, and it's probably been there for a while. I don't know. Who knows if they're filling something in here to build something else next to this, and we can't see anything to frame a reference to tell what city, place, how deep. Nothing, but it looks pretty deep. There's not a street level to be seen there, and it looks like it goes further down to the side. Who knows? No time, no date. On this picture, it could be anything. This is just a picture of a picture, right? But either way, if we assume that the pictures I've found and presented are well documented from Venice, then I'm still at odds. Now again, if I can't head to Venice myself and sample these petrified wooden columns, I really can't tell you the full truth of the story. But we can assume that his story is correct, but each assumption is just a branch on this tree that we're searching for, right? I'm keeping it all open. Are these petrified trees? Are these basalt columns? And since it's hoping to be the midway point of my video, I thought it'd be a good time to stop and reflect on the advances that I have seen and that are well documented in technology and construction technology available to us to build today. Because if we want to build on water, why are we still using logs? Why are they replacing all the logs in Venice with new logs? Are they pulling out the petrified ones? Are the new ones going to petrify? Why aren't they using concrete? And a good reason to show you why I asked that question is looking into concrete pillar construction. Because of course our realm has no shortage of vast, incredible monuments. So let's look into the materials and techniques that we may not see that go into these. Keep in mind that we're told that we're on the cutting edge of human progress, that we can do the most now with the best resources, but we choose and pick what to do based on cost. Yeah, you'll find no shortage of examples of ancient ruins, technology paralysis exceeding far our own. Let's start with a look of some well-documented advances in 3D concrete printing construction techniques. Shout out to John Levi for all the bricks and ruins he shows me, and shout out to Paul Cook for all the mind-blowing construction techniques he is unveiling from the past. Maybe I will devote a video to the world housing crisis and how maybe the old world might have been able to deal with it and live in harmony with nature and the land and people. But it seems the ideas with 3D printing construction techniques are moving in the direction to integrating themselves with nature and creating habitats for us all to live together. And here's some 3D printed wave breaks that are being placed out, and one's got to wonder what somebody would think of if they find these in 1,000 years. How long would this concrete last? Is it Roman concrete? Is it magical Portland concrete? Who knows, but similarities are uncanny, and the universe seems indifferent. If you're not opening your eyes, it's not enough to just open the door, you've got to walk in it. Do a little dance maybe, but everybody has their own. A lot of things keep spinning around the same axis, but if I don't put too many old world references. Anyways, I want to remind you and show you what we are capable of now, what we may have always been capable of. Okay, back to pillars. I hope I don't get too distracted, but according to all the research we've done on pillars and how long we've been able to just replicate these pillars being so far away, how long it takes for information to go between places, and the possible barriers to hazardous information that such architectural endeavors could expose. We find ourselves asking, what's a tree, what's a pillar, what's a rock? Because of course, people, when they often find these things, they will often use them and integrate them into their homes, their houses, their lives. Real foundation. So it's a hard line to find between what's natural, what's synthetic, and what's been found, and what has been destroyed, especially when destruction looks like it turns things back to the way nature made them. There is no reason why we have trouble distinguishing the difference, and it is easier within the confusion to divert to authority. And authority appoints historians to collect documentation and relay to us what is fact and fiction. They say, of course, we can do great things, but only at great expenses, and we are born in debt, so there will be none of that. Although when infrastructure calls for it, we do look back on past architectural foundations and techniques. We were told in the time frames that we were cutting such material and building with them everywhere. The knowledge is well documented, yet well retained. But we look and we find things that aren't so easily explained. There are artifacts made out of metals so pure, nothing can oxidize them. And then we get pictures of things that seem unreal, things that we feel like AI could have created for us, things that go so deep into the past that we are left speechless. Like, this is far out, man. Is this pillar for real, or is this a fake? How do we discern this? When I asked an architect about columns, he said they just represented strength, support. That's why they're in all the Capitol buildings. And I think we all need that little ego boost so that we don't question things. Well, ego boost never really done it for me. People call me smart, but the only real talent I feel like I have is not giving up unless I absolutely need to. We are stubborn stumps. And looking at this concrete or these construction photos, you can tell it takes a lot of work and planning to even put out a foundation. And you see now, we find the real foundation columns. These looking like some concrete pipe organ hex keys blowing me away. So if we have these, why aren't we building our foundations with these? Why isn't Venice putting these in their log replacements? How hard is it really to do any of this now? And how hard was it to do back then? Because you gotta remember, the Romans had this mythical flippin' concrete that apparently Thomas Edison recreated in his Portland concrete, which we'll be doing a video on concrete sometime, I guess. Eventually get down to that. But just, yeah, pillars of concrete everywhere nowadays. And back then, too, they had more capabilities than we are giving them credit for. Whether it's basalt columns or pillars, by now you gotta realize that when we're doing our investigative alternative research, things may not be as they seem. We've lived our entire lives on the surface, being convinced there's nothing underneath. But I think these people explored everything, everywhere, and we have so much to learn from our past. So I decided to go off and find some other ruins or city or construction that involved basalt columns and building on the water. And I've been around the land and I've seen a lot of trees. And one thing comes to mind. It's kind of hard to remember the name, but it was easy when I typed in basalt and columns in the sea. I got the lost city of Non-Mandal, Atlantis of the Pacific. It's in Micro-Asia. And you may have heard of it on this pretty awesome island, which I bet is probably a whole city ruin. I mean, here's the small part that is showing, and there's even more that's been mapped, and even more underneath the brush that hasn't been mapped, covered in vegetation and water. I recalled this one pretty well because I've probably fallen asleep to dozens of videos going on about this particular place, but I thought it was worth a good look. And when you see here from across the water coming upon it, you see a lot of different sized column stones, a lot of different foundation stones. They look really different going down, and I wonder if you dug out these canals, if there would be logs underneath these foundations. Who knows? Or maybe because they couldn't find any logs or any straight trees in this tropical place, they used these instead and decided, hey, why not build the rest of the building with them? I mean, have you tried to build with the palm tree? Those things are like sponges. They're just a huge core with a thin bark, and they don't really, only the bark petrifies really noticeably. I have some, actually. The whole site is really worth a good wonder. The effort to educate yourself about it. Myself, I'm speculating if this is how foundations were originally created. You first use the basalt columns and their electroconductivity to conduct electricity and melt them all together. Here's a melting mark. Here's a melting mark. It looks like it was hit by a beam of plasma or something. It's definitely doing some stuff that was similar with the other natural basalt columns when they were swirling. And then here's a picture I found. It looks like a foundation at the side. It doesn't look like the rest of these Mandal ruins, but it popped up when I was searching for pictures from it. There was a mention of like how this reminded somebody of Malta, but if you look at the waters around it, almost doesn't look, it looks too tropical. The waters just look different than the waters you'd see it, the chaparral of Malta. But interesting all around. So instead of trying to find a list of countless cities that are built on or near water to try to dig at their foundations, I decided to just look at more ruins, I think there was another one I had in mind, but when you cross-reference these basalt ruins, and you don't come up with a lot, so looking at other ruins and water and stuff just wasn't doing it, and I had to remember the name of this other ruin, and it took me a minute. So just bear with me, you stump and stick believers on this branch in theory. We come across World UNESCO Heritage ruins in Indonesia. And of course you can see why I had such a hard time remembering this one, because I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. I'm just going to leave that up here in the background while I go on. And you can see the references and implications to what they're saying is inside of this mountain. This mountain looks pretty steep to be having that on there, but I don't know how they know all of that's on there. We're going to take a good close look at what is on there, but it's looking like they're making it look a lot like this, and us in the alternative community know that they mine the heck out of this stuff. So you see why I'm very skeptical of what people tell us his story is telling us. Either way, I will do my homework, and I will pretend as a hermit to climb this mountain, take a good look around, and when we get to the top, we're going to float up and get a good drone eyes view. Approaching this surreal mountain, you can really see how steep it can be. And oddly, the trees from here do not look very big or thick on top, but I don't know if the distance is playing a trick. It looks like there's a creek between us and it. I wasn't able to save or transposition a lot of the pictures I found and I found one old picture. But yeah, suspiciously, I couldn't fully inherit those pictures onto my computer, but either way, they're just pictures of pictures, and going up, you can't really tell if there's a path going up, or how many trees are blocking, or when exactly the stairs start appearing, or how long they go, but they don't look like they're at the top. The trees look like they're getting thick, though. And there's a couple of walls that look really interesting. We get to what seems like the top, and we're greeted with a couple of pillars, and it looks like the stairs just disappear into the ground. And there's a lot of other tiling done with these in the area. It looks like I'm trying to get better views of this place. You really tell how everything's just been turned over so much. You can't tell one side, one angle, one position of the next. You can't really find anybody taking different pictures or different angles of things or anything in particular, but it seems it dries out and it doesn't look as covered by grass. And if we want, we can come to a view that looks like it's from the top. And it's a pretty nice one. Again, catching in the scenery, the immensity of the complex we're supposedly upon. Let's float up in the air a little bit and take a wider bird's eye view. And it just, again, gives you a real feel for not being able to experience the immensity of this site unless you're there. And of course, they'll tell us that it's well documented without digging what is underneath here. Indeed, the World Heritage Foundation does a pretty good job at preserving these sites for future generations to never dig up. And of course, we get the same stories over in China with the Emperor's Tomb, which, in case you didn't know, is also one of these pyramid mounds. And their excuse is the excess amounts of mercury in the area around, when they also farm extensively all in between all of these mounds. And indeed, we get pyramids across the realm, some that have been uncovered, and all kinds of different stories attributed to them. But I just want to show you a little look at some pictures of what supposedly other people determine is under or used to be these pyramid complexes, and also a good look at these pyramid complexes we are familiar with and what they used to look like before they were uncovered and restored controversially. This one is a burnt pyramid. I wonder how they figured that out. Well, they went inside the complex that is perfectly preserved underneath. You know, didn't bother looking at all the burning on top. But let's just say this melted without saying it melted. Hey, wouldn't it be cool if we dug this out and like made a recreation of what we thought this looked like based on artwork that we found? And we can charge people to like go there and buy food from us. And tell them how historically accurate it is because our grandfather built it. You know, did you ever see pictures of Rome the day before they dug it out? What I'm barking at is sometimes between old pictures which could have been faked and new pictures which could have been faked, it's kind of hard to draw the lines between reality, but we got to branch it all on a tree. Well, anyways, I hope you see what this video is all about, what I'm getting at, and I didn't make this video to tear into any of those people who theorize that the Devil's Tower or any of these suspicious looking basalt towers could possibly be petrified trees. Like, honestly, my best conclusion is to investigate these basalt columns, especially ones that you think might be trees. Take a microscope. I'm going to show you how to use one to investigate fossils in a fossil video I'm coming up with. I just didn't want to stick it in this one, but go find a transition zone where the fossil might still have preservations of tree material and look for signs of the cells of the trees. I think that would really lend a lot more validation to these arguments about these trees. But more important, I just wanted to ask anybody if they knew more about that picture with the Pyramid of Giza and all the columns underneath. There's a lot we can speculate about that. I don't know if I should in this video. To every single person, everything is different. The truth can look very different. So if you still want to believe that they are trees, then by all means. What kind of hermit am I to judge? I've seen new mind-blowing things every day. When I look around with my electric universe size and my old world specs, it all just becomes so imaginative to me. But hey, here's a new idea. What if instead of petrified tree stumps, they're giant petrified saguaro cactus skeletons? I mean, wouldn't that be awesome? Imagine giant saguaro cactuses like in old world times. We could build our homes in it like the nest, you know? Awesome. Anyways, thank you. God bless. Please like and subscribe. Please help support me continue my research. And I pray for all of you out there who are so brave enough to also post your alternative branching research theories come together. Please continue doing what you do best. Stay gold.
Honestly, the only thing that gives me comfort, you guys, is while I'm sitting at home, staring at the ceiling, just wishing that I had someone to talk to, is knowing that none of you idiots realize how lucky you are.